Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to AlphaBiolabs' breakfast webinar entitled Legal DNA Testing, Which Test is Best for My Client? It's great to have so many of you join us this morning. Thank you very much for your time. By way of introduction, my name is Andrew Priestley, and I'm the Marketing Manager for the legal sector at AlphaBiolabs. And I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Ashley Hodgkinson, who's our Sample Collections Manager. Now, Ashley has extensive experience of DNA, drug and alcohol testing in the UK, and she will lead the webinar this morning with myself acting as your facilitator. And I'm conscious that you all have busy days ahead of you, so we will keep the webinar duration to within 30 minutes. In terms of the agenda, Ashley will talk to you about the most common types of DNA tests for legal purposes. You'll also understand how to interpret the reported results, and you will also discover alternative methods for DNA relationship testing. If we have time at the end, there will be a Q&A session. What I would say is, please, at any point, if you think you have a question, please use the Q&A function throughout to ask any questions that you have. Because we're using the Zoom technology, by default as attendees, both your microphone and camera are switched off. So you do need to use a Q&A function. You also have access to the chat function, but please just use that if you have any sort of technical issues or anything, and I'll do my best to help you with that. Now, throughout the webinar, we'll also issue some optional polls, and there's a short post-webinar survey. We really would appreciate if you could get involved in those, because your feedback is invaluable to us, and it helps us for future planning of these webinars. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to launch the opening poll, which should appear on your screen in a moment. And there's two questions there. If you could kindly give the answers to those, I'll give everybody a few minutes to do that. That would be great. So the first question is asking you, how many different types of legal DNA tests do you think that we offer? And the second question is a bit more technical. How many pairs of chromosomes contain DNA in a single cell? Lots of answers coming through. I'm just going to give you another 10 seconds to make sure everybody gets a chance to answer those. Please do put your answers in. Okay, I think most of you have done that now. So I'm going to end the poll and I'll share the results for everybody. So yeah, quite a mix of answers there for question one. The most popular answer there was 5. In actual fact, we offer 8 different types of legal DNA tests, and Ashley will talk about all of those this morning. The technical question, how many pairs of chromosomes contain DNA in a single cell? The majority of you, 63%, said 23 pairs, and you would indeed be correct. So well done for that. It is 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, so thanks very much for getting involved in that first poll. I will stop sharing that now, and with that, I will hand over to Ashley.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for joining us. So as Andrew mentioned in the agenda, I'm going to talk to you today about the different types of tests that we offer here at AlphaBiolabs. The tests I'm going to talk about are all for relationship testing. So they're all to determine a link, most commonly between a child and a potential mother or potential father. So a little bit to brief with at the start. What is DNA? So DNA is a complex chemical that's found in the nucleus of most of your cells, and it comes as 23 pairs of chromosomes, and that's exactly what we're looking at here. So we're looking at 23 chromosomes plus the gender chromosome as well. When you're born, you inherit your DNA, and you get 50% of it from your mother and 50% of it from your father in an equal split, which I'm going to show you in a couple of slides times. But it's passed down in random combinations. So I have a brother, and myself and my brother would show common DNA because we've inherited them from the same parents, but they would be slightly different. They'd be in different combinations. So no two individuals' DNA is the same, with the exception of identical twins. And we'll talk more about this and how that can affect testing as we go through the presentation. So I'm going to start off by talking about the most common test that we are asked for here, and that is paternity testing. And then we'll move on to complex relationship testing. Complex relationship testing is used when the immediate person with whom you're trying to establish a relationship is not available. So for instance, in most of the examples I share today, we're going to be talking about a child who is trying to establish a link with a biological parent. Most commonly, we see that being an alleged father. And in cases where that male is not available, we could look at alternative testing, such as siblings, aunts or uncles, or grandparents, in order to establish that relationship and prove exactly what we're looking for. So if we start off with paternity testing, there's two types that we offer here at AlphaBiolabs for legal testing. The first one is when the child has been born. So this would include a sample from the child, the male whose relationship you're trying to establish, so what we would call the alleged father, and ideally a sample from the mother as well, if she is available, although this test can be conducted with just the child and the alleged father. Both parties would be asked to provide a mouth swab, and that's why this is conducted once the child's born, so that we are able to obtain that. And we would then examine the profile between the child and the father to see how much DNA they shared in common. This is the most conclusive result that you're going to get. So if you do have an alleged father and a child available for testing, and that's the relationship you're trying to establish, paternity testing would always be your first port of call. It's always the most conclusive test that we can offer here at AlphaBiolabs. Like I said, mum's sample is ideal, but it isn't essential. If she's available, that would help. If not, we can still conduct the test without her. So I'm going to show you how we do this. So as you can see here on the screen, you have the mother's profile in that pinky purple colour. You have a gender chromosome on the left, and then the other 23 in numerical values on the right, and then exactly the same for the father's profile. And both of these people would have inherited their DNA off their parents in an equal 50-50 split. And that's exactly what you'll see with the child's profile. So if this was a test that we were conducting here, we would look at the child's profile and we would match that up with the parents' profiles above. So as you can see in column 1, the child has an 18 and a 17, mum has an 18 and dad has a 17. In column 2, the child has a 16 and a 22, mum has a 22, dad has a 16, and so on and so forth until we get through the profile. And for paternity testing, we're looking for those profiles to match perfectly. Now, this is where the mother's profile helps us, because we can eliminate the half of the DNA that the child has inherited from the mum, and whatever we're left with must have come from that child's father. And that's why it's always helpful to have mum's sample. If you do decide to conduct a paternity test, you will receive a report which looks like this. This is a certificate of analysis. If you've used us before for drug and alcohol testing, you may be familiar with that term. But it's basically the core data and the result with a little bit of an explanation. So you can see here at the top, we always state who we tested, the names of the alleged father, the mother, and the child. If mum isn't tested, her part of that test would be left blank, so you would know whether she was included or not. We then state what the probability of paternity is. For paternity testing, because it is a conclusive result, you would only see two options here. It would either be 0%, which would mean that Tom Smith was not the biological father of Susie Smith, or you would see anything greater than 99%, and that would mean that Tom was the biological father to Susie. And then we also provide you with the technical data, which you can see on the right-hand side, which gives you a breakdown of all the chromosomes that we tested. And again, you can look at exactly how we work this out by seeing what the child's profile was and comparing that to the mothers and fathers, if you wish to do so. The alternative option for your report is to have a statement of witness report. This is a more in-depth explanation into the results. Not only will this tell you where the samples were taken and how the process was conducted, but it will also be embedded within this the photographs and the identification that any of the donors provided at the time of the appointment. So you'll be able to see that within the report. If you opt for a certificate of analysis, those photos and identification are still available, but they would be sent over separately, not within the report. So it's always useful to have a statement of witness where possible, particularly if the people who are being tested could not all be together for the sample collection, because it includes information as to how everyone's samples were taken. If the child has not yet been born, you have the option to conduct a prenatal test. In essence, you're getting the same result. You're determining who the biological father is to the child, but you're doing this before the child's born. This can be particularly useful if you are looking to set up plans to place a child for shortly after birth. You'd be able to do this in advance, knowing that you have the correct parents available to you. This can be done from the 7th week of pregnancy, and it would involve a mouth swab from the mother and the potential father, and then also a blood sample from the mother as well. And that blood sample is where we would extract that child's DNA from in order to be able to compare it to the alleged fathers. This does rely on the fetal DNA being transferred from the mother to from the baby, to the mother's blood. Therefore, just due to the nature of pregnancy, that can fluctuate throughout the time and can sometimes result in a recollection being required if the fetal DNA isn't prevalent enough. If that's the case, we will simply return to see the mother 2 weeks later, just to give it a little bit more time for that DNA to be present, and then we would attempt the testing again. And if you so wish, we could also undertake gender testing at this time.
Thanks, Ashley. That's great. We're just going to do a second poll now. So I will serve that up in one moment. Just one question. Please do keep your questions coming in using the Q&A facility. Anything that you want to ask, that would be fantastic. And I will just launch the second poll now. So we're moving on to look at complex relationship testing. The question is, in complex relationship testing, which type of test provides the least inconclusive results? And there's 5 options there. We've got full sibling, half sibling, aunt or uncle, one grandparent, or both grandparents. Which do you think is the type of test that provides the least inconclusive results? I'll just give you all a few moments to answer that. Lots of responses coming through. Real mix of choices there. While we wait for that, again, a reminder, please do take the opportunity to ask questions through the Q&A. You can see there's a couple more come through there. That's great. We will do our best to answer some of those at the end, given time. Just a few more seconds there, the second poll. Okay, so I'm just going to end that now. I think most of you had a chance to answer that. Thank you for it. And I will share the results. So in complex relationship testing, which type of test provides the least inconclusive results? And we can see every single option there has been chosen by at least one person. The majority of you, well, 50% of you think it's the full sibling test, but actually the answer is both grandparents. So I think it's just, well, 3%, I think it's about one or two people that said both grandparents. So well done to you. That is indeed the correct answer. I'm going to hand back to Ashley and she'll talk to you about that in more detail.
Okay, so we're going to move on to complex relationship testing. As I mentioned at the start, this would be in the instance where the alleged father, if that was the relationship that you were testing, is either unavailable or unwilling to provide a sample. All parties that provide samples to us must be willing to provide consent. If they're not, then unfortunately testing can't go ahead without that. So this would be where we turn to complex relationship testing to see what our options are. Now, in the poll, I'm not surprised that the majority of you went for full siblings, because when you think about it, that kind of makes the most sense, because they are going to be the closest relationship that shares the most common DNA. But it's not quite the case, and I'm going to explain to you why. When we talk about conclusive and inconclusive results, we have to be sure when we do testing here that we are confident enough that they share enough DNA to prove that they definitely are related, or they share so little DNA that we can confidently say that they're not related. If it falls anywhere between those two, then we would not report on it conclusively, and it would be deemed as an inconclusive result, because it's not possible to say either way. So we're going to talk a little bit more about when that would happen and what the percentage of inconclusive rates are, so that you can make a better informed decision when you're looking to undertake complex relationship testing. So we're going to start with sibling testing. We offer two types of testing here, either to test for full siblings or to test for half siblings. So we want to know whether you already know that they share one common parent when undertaking this test, so we can make sure we're looking at the correct calculation for you. So this allows us to establish whether two siblings share either the same mother or the same father or both parents in common. Because full siblings share both parents in common, naturally they have more common DNA, and that would be the most conclusive result out of these two options. However, half siblings can also be tested, but if we were going to do that, we would ideally want the mother from both of the siblings to be tested as well, similarly to paternity testing. So wherever possible, mum's sample is a great help to these types of tests. So we're looking at whether they share one parent in common, two parents in common, or no parents in common. And that's what we would look to you to tell us what you want from the results. It's always important to establish this from the beginning so that we're not doing incorrect calculations. For instance, if you asked to tell us whether two siblings were half siblings, we would report that as either yes or that they were unrelated. So it's really important that we know up front exactly what we're supposed to be looking for. If siblings aren't available, we can also look to test aunts or uncles. So for this example, if you were looking to establish the relationship between a child and an alleged father, but the alleged father was unavailable or unwilling, you could look to test his siblings, so his sisters or brothers, to establish that relationship with that child as aunts or uncles. And the main thing to remember about this type of test is that they must be full siblings to the alleged father. We cannot test half aunts or half uncles because there's not enough common DNA for us to be able to do so. So it's really important that you establish in the beginning that they are full siblings of that alleged father. If they're not, then we'd again need to look at alternative testing. And for grandparent testing, either we can test one single grandparent on their own or both if they're available. So again, if the alleged father's unavailable or unwilling, his parents can also be tested against the child to establish a relationship. As always, we'd want mum's sample where available, and you must be sure that they are the alleged father's biological parents. So a little bit uncomfortable to ask, but it's really important, as obviously if they're not that biological, the alleged father's biological parents, then this test won't work either. So it's just really important when we look at complex relationships that we establish that we're testing the right people. If we're not testing the right people, then we're not going to get the result that we're looking for. So it's really important to establish that from the beginning. Speaking of inconclusive rates, here is the table with all the information on about which tests provide what type of inconclusive rate. So for full siblings where no mother is available, so this would be testing two siblings to see if they share both parents in common without mum, you're looking at roughly 24% of cases that come back inconclusive. However, if the mother of the two children is able to provide a sample, that drops dramatically to 7% inconclusive rate. So you can see how much mum helps in these situations. For half siblings without any biological parents would be 26% inconclusive rate. If one of the half siblings' parents is able to provide a sample, then it drops to 15%. But if both of the siblings' mothers can provide a sample, then it drops again to 7%, so on par with the full siblings. Aunts or uncles tested alone with a child is 28%. With the inclusion of mum's sample, it drops to 16%. One grandparent drops from 23% to 15%. And then if you can get both of the alleged father's parents and mum to provide a sample, you only run a 0.1% risk of an inconclusive result in those cases. So you can see how much mum helps out in those scenarios. So if in an ideal world, dad was available for testing or the alleged father, then he would be our first option. If he isn't available, we would then look to his parents to provide samples, if not potential siblings. And then realistically speaking, aunts and uncles would be our last port of call, just due to the inconclusive rate. But it's all about looking at who's available at the time that will aid us in establishing that same relationship and then going with testing that way. If you are ever unsure as to what to do, or you have a few people available and you're not sure what option is best, give us a call. We can talk you through it and advise which would be the most beneficial type of test. So when we talk about inconclusive rates, I've said about not sharing enough DNA or not sharing so little DNA. This is how these types of tests are reported. So unlike your paternity test, where you're looking at a percentage, either 0 or greater than 99%, this is reported slightly differently. So any result that is greater than 10 in this case, and this isn't a percentage, it's a numerical figure. So anything greater than 10 is strong enough for us to be able to advise that that relationship has been proven, so that they are related as siblings, or they are related as an aunt and a child, or a grandparent and a child. So greater than 10 is supportive of that relationship. Anything between the 0 and 0.1, we don't report any lower than 0, would not be supportive of the relationship, so they don't share enough DNA to be related. And then anything within those two figures would be classed as an inconclusive. So anything between 0.11 and 9.9 would be an inconclusive result. And that's how the reporting will look, with the same layout as the paternity test reports. Alternative methods. So if you are unsure or you wanted to look at alternatives to the ones that we spoke about, there's two main ones that we can recommend here. The first one I'm going to talk about is maternity testing. The reason why it's on as an alternative method is it's not that common that people come to us to request this type of test. So this would be where you're looking to establish a relationship between a mother and a child. Sometimes if the child's separated from the mother at birth, this test is useful. And sometimes the immigration office request it if they want that to support passport applications, which Andrew will talk to you about at the end of the presentation. Then that's where that could be useful, but it depends on the circumstance. The other type of test, which we do get quite a few requests for, is a Y chromosome test. So this is not testing a direct relationship, and it's really important that I point that out. This type of test is to see whether two males share the same Y chromosome, so the same paternal line. If you have, for instance, a male cousin, so a child who has a male cousin, and they are only linked through the male line, so the child's father and the potential cousin's father are brothers, they have the same father, then this test could be useful to show that they come from the same paternal line. And it's only prevalent in males, so if they were related through the mother's family, then this wouldn't work. It must be through the alleged father or the father's family. And it's not going to tell you the exact relationship. So it won't come back to state that they are cousins, but it will show whether or not they are from the same paternal line. So it's always a good one to give us a call about. You do not run the risk of an inconclusive result for those tests either. So it's a really good one to lean on if you are struggling for people willing to provide samples and that suits the circumstance. Alternative methods. Unfortunately, we do come across cases where alleged fathers are deceased or other family members are deceased and we need to do testing for them. It is possible to do, and I would always advise you give us a call on these cases so that we can discuss sample options, what's available at the time, be that whether they have already been buried or they're currently waiting for the funeral to take place, depends on what options we have. But it is something we can help with as long as the next of kin provides consent. Again, without consent, we are not willing to undertake any testing because we're not allowed to. So that's really important that the next of kin is aware of what's happening and is willing to sign consent for the test to go ahead. But most commonly in these cases, we would use toenail clippings or deep thigh tissue from the deceased family member. And then anybody else who's taking part in the test would provide a buccal swab, just like any of the other tests I've spoken about today. Sample collection methods, like I've mentioned, it would just be a buccal swab just from the cheek, really simple, really easy to do. And appointments take roughly 15 to 20 minutes, depending on any questions that the donor has at the time. The only sample that we would take blood for relationship testing would be the prenatal, and it'd just be from the mother. Every donor that provides a sample to us here is asked to have their photograph taken at the time of the appointment, and that's time stamped and dated as well, so that we can prove when that sample was taken. And they're also asked to provide one form of photographic identification if it's available. And like I said before, if you do opt for the statement of witness, it's embedded within that report. Key points to consider. I've said it before, but just be sure of the relationship you're looking to establish and assess who's available before going ahead with any testing. If the alleged father's available and that's the relationship you're looking to test, always go for paternity testing. It's the most conclusive result. And if you're ever unsure, get in contact with us and we'll be able to advise you further. So I'm just conscious of time at the moment. I don't want to keep you any longer than what we agreed. So I'm not going to answer any questions at the moment, but what we will do is we'll answer them afterwards and then Andrew will circulate them round for you. So apologies that we've run out of time, but there's just so much to tell you about this type of testing and I just wanted to make sure that we went through everything. So we'll send those out separately via email.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Ashley. And again, apologies, we've not quite got time to answer some of the questions, but we will, as Ashley says, send answers out to all of you. Thank you to those of you that have put the questions into the Q&A. Okay, so to finish off, closing poll, I'm just going to launch that. It's just one question. Please be honest with your feedback. Question is, has your knowledge of legal DNA testing improved as a result of this webinar? And you've got 3 choices. I'll just give you all a moment to answer that. It's great, lots of responses coming in. I think most of you have done that now, just a few more seconds. Please do give your feedback, it's very important to us. Great, okay, I think most of you have done that. Thank you very much. I'm going to end that, quickly share the results. So really positive there, 91% of you said yes, absolutely. And the other 9% have said to a certain extent, but would like to know more, which is great. So really positive. It sounds like the last 30 minutes have been beneficial for all of you. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so to close then, well, why choose Alpha for your DNA testing? Well, test results are issued next day as standard. And where needed, we can also issue a report on the same day that the lab receives the sample. We are accredited by the Ministry of Justice, and we have UCAS accreditations, ISO 17025 and ISO 9001. All the tests that Ashley spoke about this morning can also be used for immigration cases because we are Home Office approved. And those results are also accepted by UK visas and immigration. So if you have a client who's got a relative living abroad who they want to bring to the UK and you feel that it would help that case by doing a form of DNA testing, then we can support with that as well. And we do have access to a large international collection network. So please do get in touch with us if you think that's something we can help with. So we've also got a special promotion. So 50% off all legal DNA testing, and that runs until the end of April. You can give us a call or email us. Just need to quote the code DNA50 to ensure that the quotation does include that discount. Alternatively, you can visit our website, alphabiolabs.com, and you can request the quotation online. So please do get in touch with us. We are the experts in legal DNA, drug and alcohol testing. There's the main contact methods there on the screen for you. If you use social media and you're on LinkedIn or Twitter, then please look us up on there and give us a follow and we'll follow you back. And it just remains for me to say thank you very much once again for your time this morning. Please do just take a moment to complete the post-webinar survey, which will appear on your screen in a moment. Your feedback is absolutely invaluable to us, so that would be great. We look forward to hopefully seeing you at future AlphaBiolabs webinars, and have a great day. Thank you very much. Thanks to Ashley, and all the best. Bye.